Ladies and gentlemen, we are about ready to begin our meeting. Before we do, I'm going to stand for a moment of silence, and I will follow that with a pledge of allegiance to our flag. You are welcome to join me if you so desire. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we will go ahead and call to order, what's today, the August 6th special called meeting of the Sumner County Board of Education. It is early. And Board, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for all of you showing up. I'd like to thank all the staff members for being here. I know this is a little unusual to be meeting at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I will go ahead and share with you that we have this meeting today. I have to leave here and go straight to one of our county political parties to make a presentation on the 1981 Financial Management Act. And I have to leave there and go and put in 4 or 5 hours cleaning up the campus of one of our local high schools. So I appreciate you being here. This is the only day we could get this, only time we could squeeze this in. Let me speak a little bit to the timing. The County Budget Committee meets on Monday night, which is August the 8th. And we hope if we get a budget passed today to present that to them on Monday night, which they will present to the full commission on the 15th. Had we not been able to get a budget to them on the 8th, the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Budget Committee would have been September 12th with the commission meeting on September 19th. So I appreciate all of you coming out and being willing to work on this this morning. And with that, Ms. Dursky, I think you have incorporated some changes that were discussed at the budget workshop. And if you would, just start with those, and then we'll take it from there.
Now, basically, everything that we talked about Tuesday night at the study session has been added back into the budget. That includes a minimum of a 3% raise for all employees, certified and classified. It keeps in the increases in legal fees and trustees commissions that we talked about. It adds back the purchase of all of the textbooks. It adds back growth positions that we had taken out, growth teaching positions that we had taken out and hope to accommodate somewhere else. It includes a close to $1 million increase, or $1 million increase to alleviate or eliminate school fees. It adds back various other positions and nursing positions, social workers, some clerks, the operations and maintenance positions and technology, and it adds back the capital outlay. It is approximately $12.3, I think, million out of balance.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Dursky. All right. We all have spoken the things that we would like to see included in this budget. I know we've all talked about presenting a needs-based budget, but also for informational purposes, the Budget Committee of the County Commission has already set the tax rate with no increase for this year. It's still at $2.02. That has not been approved by the Commission, but it's my understanding that there's little, if any, support to change the tax rate for this year. So that being said, we have a budget that is $12 million in excess of the revenue that the County Commission and state will be providing to us. So with that being said, we may need to start re-examining some of the things we asked to be included in this budget and determine our priorities and get this as close as we can to what we believe the Commission would be willing to pass for us. So we're open. Dr. Phillips, I don't know if you have any recommendations on priorities that you would like to discuss, or if any board members have anything they would like to discuss first.
Well, I guess I'll start out. I appreciate all of you being here on Saturday morning, and as Chairman Long mentioned, this is our attempt to try to make sure that we comply with the time frame that has been established on the commission side to try to make their meeting dates and get them a budget. So I do appreciate your work to make that happen. As we went through the positions and the additions that we had on the summary sheet, draft 4, I guess, which is included back in draft 5, we kind of went through and had a roundtable discussion at the budget study session about all of these and all these issues that are listed out that we would like to see included. As Mr. Long mentioned, the Budget Committee has passed the tax rate, and of course that'll go to the full commission. And so we realize that based on their recommendation, the tax rate as it currently stands has not been changed, and therefore the revenue stream will be limited unless that changes. And so we are understanding that we have a long list of needs, but we also have to be somewhat realist in the sense that those needs may or may not be filled. So I just think we need to gear our discussion toward what we need to include, plus also understanding that we could possibly be in a situation where those things are not funded. We're back at the table trying to determine whether to include some things and make cuts in other areas, or to try to make the budget work. So I think that's just kind of where we're at and what needs to drive the discussion.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Any board members have any input at this point? Ms. Cox or Mr. Duncan?
Is all of our essential needs in there, such as textbooks and things of that nature for classrooms?
Well, let me speak to that. Ms. Brown, you may speak. When we came for the workshop on Tuesday, we had textbooks that were recommended, I believe, by Ms. Brown, included in there. We added additional textbooks. I'm going to let her speak to if we could still achieve our goals without those additional books.
The first priority is the literature books. Those have been out of date, really, for what we've been using them for 12 years. But those middle school literature books was my first priority, high school literature books second priority. The textbooks listed in item 7 and under, I feel like that we would be fine not purchasing those this year. But I would just beg and plead to get those literature books, though.
Ms. Duncan, is that all?
Is there anything else that we can think about that is essential for the classroom that we're leaving out, or that we think we can't fund this year, that we might ask them to fund?
No, sir. The textbooks, item 7, is the main portion of instruction that was added back in Tuesday evening. So if I'm perfectly fine with leaving those out as long as we get those literature books. And the literature books are included in the budget, the first budget 4.
All right, Ms. Cox.
And I agree with Dr. Phillips. I believe that we do need to, I know we talked on Tuesday night, and I first of all want to state that just outright, I believe, and I think we all agree here, that there's many items in our school budget that we're just simply underfunded. I think we agree with that. There's many positions here that we feel like are absolutely needed. We talked about positions like maintenance. We talked about nursing positions. We talked about textbooks that we certainly need in the classroom. We talked about several things that we feel like are absolutely necessary for us to run the most efficient school system. Unfortunately, the county commission doesn't agree. They've already set a tax rate. They have agreed that at this point, we don't even know if we're going to get our growth funds, which I feel like is absolutely, completely necessary for us to even be able to even attempt to get to where we even halfway need to be in terms of meeting the needs of our school system. But we don't make that choice. We're not the funding body. We have one set of priorities. We actually even have $8 million worth of maintenance projects we can't even attempt to get to. So we're not, able to make those decisions. So we are actually left with trying to set the priorities, and then they are the ones who get to make the choice of whether to fund those priorities or not. So, so in my guesstimation, the last couple of years, we've sent them a balanced budget, and then we got more monies taken away from us. So we thought, well, this year we'll send them a needs budget, and we're still being told that we're not going to be able to get those things funded. So I think at this point, we have to try to kind of do what we started to do on Tuesday and try to give them at least somewhat closer to the first budget that we sent them, because apparently even if we send them a needs budget, they're still not going to send that. They're still not going to fund that. So I think what we need to do is try to get back to the first, I guess, draft 4 and look at what we absolutely have to fund, which was the state increases. We looked at the step increases. We looked at the legal fees. We looked at those textbooks that Mrs. Brown talked about, diesel fuel, some of those. I think we need to really look at that first budget and see what out of those things we absolutely have to fund and get back to that first budget. And then the other things we talked about on these other pages, maybe we can send a priority list and just show the county commission, these are things that we're going to be without this year. Without any type of revenues, and just let them see, these are things we're going to do without in terms of a school system, but maybe get back to that first page and send them that budget, but at least show them the things that we're going to have to do without as a school system. So again, that's not our choice, that's not what we want, but we really don't have a choice at this point. They've already set the tax rate. They're not really giving us a choice at this point, but I think we do need to kind of refocus on that first draft budget that Mrs. Dursky sent us. And I do think that there are even a couple of things on that first page. Mrs. Brown and I talked, and at least looking at the textbook adoptions, 6th through 8th is again the priority. And I think she even talked about maybe the $400,000 for 6th through 8 even being the first priority on that textbook adoption. So that would be where I think we need to refocus our attention is the first page on that on those expenditures.
Let me say one more
Thank you,
thing.
Mr. Duncan.
We do have an obligation to educate children in this county. Now, whether they want to fund the needs or not, we're educating some of their children also. So, in my opinion, I think we should send the needs over there and tell them, you know, this is what we need to educate, fund our system. That's left up to y'all, whether y'all going to work with us to do that or not. That's the honest way we're going. We shouldn't be afraid to send it over there, regardless of whether they send it back or not. We just need to send it over and tell them that's what we need. I mean, that's my opinion. You know, I don't know how the rest of you feel about it, but that's the way I feel about it.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Ms. Cox?
And it's not that I don't agree with you, and I know what you're saying. My concern with sending a budget 10 million over, and again, I think what's happened is that because they have not funded the other several years, because they have not increased our funding the last couple of years, we've actually gotten in a crisis point at this point. But I think what would happen if we sent a budget that's this much out of balance, they would basically say, well, this is what's happened. You all can't manage your funds. So that's why we did the 81 Act, because you all can't manage your funds. I agree with what you're saying, but I do feel like what would happen then, they would use it against us and say, that's the reason why we're taking over your funding body is because you all can't manage your funds. You all are 10 million over. Even though many of these things are very vital, and I believe the reason why we're so out of balance at this point is because they have actually been taking away money from us the last several years, and that's why we're at a crisis point where we've got many textbooks that are 12, 14 years out of step. We have been putting 2,000 more students into our school system, so now we're at a crisis point of needing to staff more people. We're getting at a point where it's catching up to us, and so that's why we're so out of balance, but they're going to use it, in my opinion, against us, saying that we can't manage our funds. And so I think many other capital projects would be at risk if we don't cut it down a little bit. So that it's not that I'm not agreeing with you, I just feel like it would be used against us. So that's my point on that.
Thank you, Ms. Cox. Anyone else? Let me say this real quick. You know, there are some things that we had in draft budget 4 that we entered our meeting in the other night in the workshop that are mandatory. We don't have really a choice on. For instance, the state requires that we provide a 1.6% pay increase to teachers up through, with experience up through year 20. The problem is, they pay us, give us 1.6% increase on a base amount of 30, what is it, Ms. Dursky, 34, 36,000?
It's 38.
$38,000, but if a teacher's making $45,000 or $50,000, we have to provide the 1.6% increase on that dollar amount. And so we have to make up that difference. What did that do to our budget? Looks like it's a little over $2 million. That we don't have a choice but to pick up. When we look at trustee commissions of $250,000, we don't have a choice but to pay that amount. That's established by state law. We've already agreed that we have to purchase school buses. Well, the commission has agreed that if we'll put in $500,000, they'll pick up the balance to purchase 14 buses. Well, that's $500,000. Our diesel fuel has gone up $1 per gallon. Every 7 miles we roll a bus is 1 extra gallon of fuel. And we roll a lot of miles. I can't remember what the total number is, but a million miles or something. So, you know, it's difficult when you have increased costs that are mandated like that, but you don't have an increase in funds. So, you know, I know where we are. I've heard Ms. Brown say that the $1.1 million that we added for additional textbooks above and beyond her recommendation, that she feels we can meet our educational goals this year without adding those additional books, as nice as that would be for us to have, that she thinks she can squeeze us one more year. So, you know, that may be something that we could reprioritize and take that number back out of the budget. But, you know, at some point we need to start getting some motions to either remove some items from draft 5 and get it back closer to draft 4, or we're going to need a motion to approve the budget as is. So, but we can have some more discussion if we'd like. Mr. Hale?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A quick question. Ms. Dursky, if I may, in the last 4 years, how many pennies of the tax allocation have been taken away from the school system?
I believe it's 3 pennies,
3 pennies, and what does that equate to in dollars and cents?
just a little under 1.2 million.
$1.2 million that's been taken away. So had they not taken away those pennies from us, we would have an additional $1.2 million this year.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we might potentially also have a larger fund balance if that revenue had come in the prior year.
And we're expecting, are we expecting any pennies to be taken away this year?
History would tell us that, yes.
Okay. The next question I have is, does this draft budget number 4, does it include the state growth funds that we had in last year? Have we put that?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so we do have the growth funds in there. You know, I would say, Mr. Chairman, for the last 3 years, I know I've spoken probably to the point of sounding like a broken record on this board about the need to bring our percentage of salary and benefits in line with what needs to be happening. I think this year we're seeing that. Dr. Phillips stated the other night that maybe 80% would be an attainable goal for best practices. If we get through this year, we've got a year. I don't think we can continue to do this. This particular commission has shown no inclination to increase tax rates. We've been going now, the school system is on less money, no growth money, the same money for 4 years. It's going to be incumbent upon us to bring those lines. Dr. Phillips, I know it's early in the game for you, so I don't want to put this on your shoulders. Can we get from 87% to 80%? How long is it going to take us to do that? I mean, we're talking about $14 million.
I appreciate the question. To not sound like I'm not trying to answer your question, I don't know. It's going to take us some time. I don't think it can be done in 1 year, but I think we can make great strides to make it happen within a couple of years, hopefully. And the reason I say that is because I'm really not sure the level of attrition we have in some of those spots that we would be able to take attrition on positions that don't impact necessarily directly the classroom in regard to the teacher slots and class size and those types of things, because you want to try to shield yourself from that as much as possible. So we're just going to have to look at that, be aggressive about it in December and January and February when we start to determine the level of attrition that we might have within some of those jobs.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think there's another question I have. We talk about step raises that you mentioned a while ago, 1.6% for those teachers between 1 and 19 years. Has County General committed to a raise to their employees this year in what they're doing?
They, yes, they have recommended a 3% pay increase to all county general employees.
Ms. Dursky, do we know what it would take, including the funds we're getting from the state, to offer a 3% raise to all of our employees? Less the amount that, the step increase that's coming, so that everybody could get that?
About 1.4 million.
I'll have it this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. Anyone else? Ms. Silkwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to agree with Mr. Duncan and Ms. Cox. I think we need to prioritize students. I think textbooks are very important. I think that at least beginning to try to cover some of these student fees that we have in the classroom for copy machines and copy paper, computers, and at the high school level, a fee for nearly every class. I think that it's definitely time we show some responsibility there and move toward beginning to fund some of that. I would agree with a budget that would fund everything on page 1, or actually page 2, and then also at least half of item 6, which would be beginning to reduce those and move toward eliminating those student fees that we have in the classroom. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Silkwood, is that a motion to revise what we included in item 6 from 1.134900 to half of that amount?
Yes, it is.
All right, I have a motion. Is there a second? It's a second by Mr. Hale. Any discussion on that particular item? Mr. Gregory?
Yes, just review exactly what you went over there.
Well, the motion we have on the table is the increase that we're putting to reduce or replace the fees we charge up front to the individual parents on enrollment day, rather than 1.134 million, to reduce that to half of that amount, which is the amount I think that the PTO committee recommended sufficient for 1 year. This actually represents a 2-year increase. Is that right, Ms. Silkwood?
Is she talking, when she says page 1, or Ms. Silkwood, are you talking about the draft document that?
Page 3.
The summary that Ms. Stursky gave us, okay.
It can be found on the notes that Ms. Dursky gave us, draft 4 notes, page 3, item number 6.
Mr. Chairman, let me make sure with the motion I seconded. Are we talking about, for the purpose of discussion, changing this number to half of what it is, or are we talking about putting that into the budget that we'll send to the, are we picking out a line item now to say, let's send half, make sure half of this is in the budget?
Yeah, what the motion is on the table is, currently, we have included in our most recent budget, which is draft number 5, we have included allocations increase in fees of $1.134 million, $1,134,900. And Ms. Silkwood's motion is to cut that number in half, which is sufficient to cover an increase in fees for 1 year rather than 2 years.
While we're on this, if I could, Mr. Chairman, address this to you or Ms. Silkwood, and I know we discussed this the other night, want to make sure I'm clear. These monies that would be in the budget would be for the following school year, because we need them in the budget before the end of this school year in order to pick it up at the beginning of next school year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Bill, is that all you got? All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any further
What,
discussion?
yeah,
Mr.
are
Gregory?
the salary increases still, are they in there?
The only thing we're talking about adjusting at this point is the increase in our allocation fees,
Okay,
by reducing it by approximately 550,000. Ms. Dursky?
right.
Just for
Number 6.
I'm sorry. Just for clarification, am I to understand that we're basically going back to draft number 4 and adding in an amount for the fees?
Well, those fees were included into draft 5.
Right.
We're going to reduce what was included in draft 5 by half of that number.
Okay, but basically, if we take out everything else on pages 3, 4, and 5, are we not going back to draft number 4?
The notes that you provided to us the other night on page 3, item number 6,
Right.
says increase in allocations to reduce or replace fees. We added that into draft number 5. And
We're
the
gonna
motion,
reduce it.
the motion is to reduce that by half.
But the motion is also not to include anything else on pages 3, 4, and 5, correct?
No. The
No.
motion is just that one single item at this point. This is-
Mr. Chairman.
Oh,
we're moving
no,
through
that's
this
not how I
slowly. Ms.
understood it.
Silkwood?
Actually, if I could clarify, that's not exactly what I meant with the motion.
Great.
Sorry, which I didn't really word as the motion, so I guess it needs some clarification. Actually, what I'd like to see included is everything on page 2, so that's the mandatory increases and whatnot, and then half of item 6, which is the instructional
All
allocation.
right, so that is taking us back to draft 4. We're going to include those mandatory items that are on page 2, which is the step increases, the trustees' commissions, the diesel fuel, the textbooks recommended by Ms. Brown. And then, in addition to that, we will agree to add half of item 6. So I guess to be clear, everything we added into draft 5, we're now working off of draft 4. And we're going to go back and add to draft 4 again. So set draft 5 aside, work from draft budget number 4. Understand that already included in draft budget number 4 is everything that was on page 2. And then we're going to add to draft budget number 4, item 6 off of page 3, half of that number for an increase in the allocation to fees. Is everybody clear now on what we're doing?
My second stands on that.
All right, Mr. Hale, thank you. Mr. Gregory?
On these, increase in salaries, I think we need to put something in there. It may not be 3%, but I think something needs to be included.
Mr. Gregory, if we can, let's get through this particular
Okay.
motion, and then we'll address that additional amount as a separate motion. So does everyone understand what the motion on the table is saying? Ms. Brown, do you have something?
Well, how much money are you talking about in that second wave, that second part of the motion?
Well, it's approximately $550,000 on student fees, or
Okay,
allocation
well,
fees.
okay. What's the second wave, what's the cost in that,
Well,
estimated?
draft number 4
Okay.
was a budget that was presented to us on Tuesday night. Included in draft number 4 is everything that is on page 2 of the document titled Draft Number 4 Notes. And Ms. Dursky, I think, has some additional copies if anyone doesn't have that. And so the items that are included in draft 4, number 4 budget are the step raises for teachers, the 1.6% increase on the BE portion of the teacher salaries, 12 teaching positions that were formerly funded out of the federal budget, medical insurance increase, dental insurance increase, our portion of the school bus purchase of $500,000 to get us 14 school buses, increase in our legal fees, the trustee commission, the $861,000 for the textbooks recommended by Ms. Brown, and a $175,000 increase on our diesel fuel. So that's included, and then we're adding to that approximately $550,000 in increase in the student allocation fees. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll show Ms. Cox opposed. That motion passes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're building back on draft budget number 4. So if you'd like to refer back to the notes section, Mr. Hill,
Question, when you're ready.
I'm ready.
This is going to go to Ms. Dursky. Ms. Dursky, how much of the Ed Jobs funds are remaining that are unallocated? And when I say unallocated based on a motion we came from compensation with, and I'll let you know where I'm going with this. I'm not necessarily talking about a salary increase, but is this the now to see how much money's left there that we might be able to get all employees use that money to get to a 3% raise? I'm not sure how much is left in there.
In draft 4, we had moved 14 teaching positions to Ed Jobs
Okay,
using the available funds.
so
So-
that's all the remaining funds? Okay. So no remaining Ed Jobs funds in draft 4.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Cox.
I wanted to follow up on that. That was though with the prevention coordinator positions and also those PACE positions, correct?
We had not voted on the prevention coordinator positions. The PACE positions are included in there.
I thought we
have
did,
not-
from my understanding, we did put in the prevention coordinator positions I know we recommended that to the full board, the prevention coordinator positions and the PACE. We
And that-
recommended that to the full board.
My understanding was it was recommended, but Tuesday was not a voting session. We had not voted on the federal projects budget yet.
But I just want to make sure that, I know we did have money still available for that though, from my understanding. You just said there was no monies. I don't know that we did recommend that to the
So
full board.
there's 14 positions in there. We can use up to three for prevention coordinators and the balance for teachers, however the board decides to allocate that.
I just want to make sure there were still those monies in there.
All right, anyone else?
I guess I just want to make additional comment. I'm just concerned that we keep going more on this budget, and I know I've just had several conversations with county commissioners that, again, I'm just concerned about, we do have some capital projects that we want funded, which is the station camp expansion. I know the beach projects are still, looming, and the roof at Rucker Stewart. And so I'm just concerned that, again, if we continue to show a budget that's completely out of balance, that our growth funds are going to be at risk, and those capital projects that we completely want funded, I just don't want those to be at risk if we show them a budget that's completely out of hand. So I really want us to, as much as I want everything in this budget funded, and I know all of us do, that if we continue to go opposite of this first page, that those projects will be at risk. And I know that the conversations that I've had with county commissioners is that those projects may be at risk if we show them a budget that's out of balance. I know those are just conversations I've had with county commissioners. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right. But I just feel that if we don't concentrate and try to whittle down the first page, that may be true. I'm just telling you the conversations I've had with county commissioners on that. I'm not saying that it's right or fair. I'm just saying I just feel like if we can continue to try to concentrate on this first page, I think that would be better for the capital projects that we're trying to get funded. So that's just a comment. I'm just putting it out there for discussion and just wanting us to know those are just some conversations I've had with county commissioners.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dursky. Ms. Cox. Ms. Dursky, can you tell me draft 4, remind us, out of balance, in balance, below balance, we all of a sudden have lots of cash, where are we standing? With draft 4, we were at, and we just added $550,000 approximately to draft 4.
My recollection, I'll pull it up, but I think we were about 3.2 million out of balance.
All right, so
3.7 now.
Does that include, so about 3.7 million. So we went on that previous vote from a budget that was $12 million out of balance to a budget that's $3.7 million out of balance. All right, Mr. Hale?
Mr. Chairman, could you, we just talked about this a minute ago, could you refresh my memory on what the textbook cost is if we just do the middle school?
Ms. Brown?
Middle school's $426,884.69. And let me say while we're back on textbooks, one of the things we did look at, CTE, all those textbooks were up for adoption, or the majority of them were up for adoption 2 years ago, and they got cut. And so they, that budget line was $634,000 if we'd have funded what we need to for CTE. And again, we were 2 years behind. And so we went to Mr. Hollerman, who's over CTE, and I asked him to take a look at what was must-have for those teachers. And we even looked at doing classroom size. So there is $40,272 in there for family and consumer science. Those were the oldest textbooks of CTE. So we have $40,000 that's in budget for those CTE books. And then we're asking for middle school and high school literature. But the breakdown is $426,884 for middle school, and high school is $434,515.
And then is that 40,000, if you take the 426 and the 434 and the 40, that adds up to the 861? Or is that 40,000 somewhere else, or is it included in that 861?
It's somewhere else.
Okay, all right. But it's your professional opinion that we could get by with the middle school books this year? I mean, textbooks are important. As much as I'd like to see us move away from hard textbooks, still need them in the classroom.
Middle school's first priority. The high school literature books would be second priority, but they are needed.
Well,
But if you asked me to tell you what is a must-have for this coming year, it'd be middle school literature books.
okay. These other books that are 12 years old, after this year, we'll actually have, or during this year, we'll have kids using books that were purchased and adopted before they began kindergarten.
That's correct.
It's also my understanding that many of the teachers aren't even giving them out anymore. They're so old that they don't even give them out anymore. It's my understanding.
High school, it's very possible because they teach from novel sets and develop units around novels, paperbacks.
Because I've spoken with several literature teachers, they say it's so old that they don't even hand them out anymore. That's how old that they are.
Correct. But if we purchase the new textbooks for the high school curriculum, that's just an aid so that we make sure our teachers are, one, teaching what's being tested, and our kids, we know our kids are getting the curriculum that we want them to get, instead of everyone doing their own thing.
And I've actually had and if you can address this, because this is upsetting to me, I know that many times when I tell a couple of my county commissioners about this, they say, well, literature doesn't change. It's you read the same things. And this is upsetting to me because when I speak with my literature teachers, they say, well, some of the literature does not change, but the method that they learn absolutely changes, and the way that the children learn absolutely changes. Can you please address this so I can speak to my county commissioners and tell them that this is the reason why we need updated literature books, and the things that they're required to teach our students, it absolutely changes. If you could please address this so I can speak to my county commissioners and tell them the reason why we need these things funded, because this is very upsetting to me.
There are several reasons. One, when we look at brain-based learning and how we learn and how our brains develop, every single day there's new strides being made on how children learn and how we learn as adults. And so that is now being incorporated in these newer textbooks with the strategies, research-based strategies that they give the teachers to implement and to use in classrooms. Another one is just the curriculum standards, and we know we had a swing in curriculum standards, what our state was asking us to teach. That has happened, and really we're going to Common Core. So if we don't implement these new textbooks, we are going to be 2 curriculum standards behind. So these textbooks were adopted when we were asked to teach one set of curriculum standards. Then a few years ago, we were asked to teach another curriculum standards. And then in 2014-15, we'll all go to Common Core standards. What that means is what is being tested and what's being required that we teach our students are not in those old textbooks.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory, do you have something?
I was writing and listening at the same time. Did you mention the testing with the new textbooks? The fact that, and I don't like this is something that I really don't like at all, but the fact that the testing procedures, the language is geared to the new textbooks. Did you mention that?
When we adopt a textbook, it is aligned to the curriculum that we are asked to teach. And because it is aligned to that curriculum, test makers make the test to that curriculum. So yes, sir, if we adopt new textbooks, then we can assure that's what is being taught in the classroom is what we're going to be tested on.
And see, we're held accountable every year at this time of the year when all these test results come back. And it may be nothing, our scores could be reduced because our students have not been introduced to the language that's on the test. And our teachers, they don't know that. But these textbook companies, the testing procedures, they're connected. They're very much connected. Do I like that? No, I don't like it. But it's a fact.
Let me come to Ms. Silkwood and then back to Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dursky, do we still have a 6% fund balance?
When you say 6%, are you speaking of the beginning fund balance?
I'm speaking of what I'm working off of draft 4. Have we, when we're looking at all these increases that we just voted on, does that take away our fund balance at all?
Yes, I have used the maximum allowable amount of the fund balance to balance the budget in draft 4 and 5.
Okay. My understanding is that 3% is the required reserve fund balance. Is that correct?
If your revenue is not sufficient to meet your expenditures, yes, you are required to keep 3% on hand. The 6% that you're looking at is what we ended last year with and what we begin this year with. The 3% applies to what I am projecting to end the year with in June of 2012.
Okay. So just to clarify, where are we if we included everything we just voted on? So that whole page 1 and then half of item 6. As far as a percentage, our fund balance, what would it be?
The projected deficit includes having to keep 3% in reserve.
And that's what we would have, 3% in reserve, or would we have 4% or 5 or 6%?
I'm budgeting that we will have 3%. It's difficult to know exactly what we'll have until we get to the end of the year. Things fluctuate during the year. But the budget is based on ending the year next year with 3%.
Okay, thank you.
Two items, Mr. Chair. One is, I'd like to ask Ms. Brown and Dr. Phillips, talking about adopting these new textbooks, I'm trying to prioritize this to say, is if we're going to try to get as close to just increasing the mandatory items, is it more important, the textbook adoption would be for the following school year, won't be adopted during this school year. When we take the average student, and I know this is a tough question, I know we have students that excel and students that struggle. If you take the average student, how much difference on their testing, how much difference does that new textbook adoption make? Are we going to see points? Is there some qualifiers? Is there some idea, or is it just something that you know is going to help, or has somebody qualified that? In other words, how much does it help?
There's no way to give a specific figure or percentage points or anything like that. I will tell you that I have vouched to Dr. Phillips that just by implementing the new textbooks, math textbooks that we did last year, I expect to see an increase in our math scores. We have told our teachers and our administrators repeatedly, and we reiterated it again at the K-12 principals meeting, that our teachers are to be teaching that textbook with fidelity. We don't want them branching out and doing their own thing or they're welcome to bring in supplemental stuff to help children, but the primary source of that math teaching is going to come from that textbook because, just like Mr. Gregory pointed out, it is tied directly to our curriculum. It's tied directly to what's being tested. It's tied, And when we talk curriculum and what's being tested, it really is about what's going to make that student successful in life. Sometimes we get tied up and think it's all a testing rigmarole, but we forget that for every student that tests at proficient advance, that's another student that has a better chance at succeeding in life. But I don't have a specific number or percentage points. There's no way of determining that. But I can tell you that I expect math scores, because our district and our county implemented the new textbooks last year. I expect those math scores this year to show an improvement.
Thank you. And then I guess if we're getting to this, you know, if I have to make a call, would I rather budget in new textbooks for next year or the fee waivers? The fee waivers are something that, you know, yes, I support them wholeheartedly. Mr. Brown and I have been on this for the whole time I've been on the board. I do support that. But if it comes down to this budget and I have to look at, would I rather prioritize textbooks or that item? Because it looks like if we cut the textbooks in half, we're talking about roughly the same amount of money that we're talking about. I'm probably going to lean towards textbooks on that. But my question is, that doesn't mean that I don't believe in the student fees as well. But I think that's maybe something that when the county commission commits to giving us the funds to do it, maybe that's the time for that. But with that said, between those two items, and I know we're not down to just those two items, I would lean more towards having textbooks. Where I was going with that, but I still believe in that. Ms. Dursky, is there some way during the year that if those additional fee waivers are not included in this budget for next school year, is there some way during the year that we could perhaps if the fund reserve, if savings come in some of the budget items, fund reserve balance ends up, is there some way to have a budget line item that's zero that we could transfer to during the year so that maybe by January, February, we could take a look to see if we can start working on those fee waivers, getting the fees down before next school year. So if we don't actually budget it now, there is a methodology by which we can, if we have savings during the year, if additional revenue comes in, if we get a grant or something, it could go into that particular line item?
Yes, during the year or any time before June 30, the board can designate a portion of the fund balance for fees for the following year. And by board motion and approval and having it in the minutes, that then would set that money aside and it would have to be used for fees the following year.
So we could leave that out of the budget now, sometime between now and next June, did you say?
Yeah, anytime before June 30th, the board can take that action, and then it becomes an obligation for the 2012-13 school year.
So we could get through this budget process and deal with that during the school year and still have it done by the beginning of next year.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Is that a motion for a change?
Discussion point.
All right. Well, we're not making a lot of progress here.
And I would agree with you, Mr. Hale. I believe that if there is a priority to be given, I think that textbooks correlate to increased test scores. That's what we're here to do. We're here to educate the children. I think that the fees are something certainly different. I think that that's why I just tended to not, I mean, I completely agree. I think that we definitely need to help our parents as much as possible, but I think in terms of what we need to prioritize teachers, textbooks, technology. That's why we need to make sure that these textbooks are getting in the hands of these teachers. I mean, we're talking about 12-year-old textbooks. It's just outrageous. So that's why I didn't want to take out that money. If I think we need to concentrate on this first page. This is a prioritized list by staff. Concentrate on this first page, and then again look at the things that we looked at before. So I do like that idea. I think that's a great idea, Mr. Hale. I think that would be something that we should maybe look at, prioritizing those fees later on in the year.
Ms. Chokewood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, this is not really a fee waiver versus textbook discussion, because I support fully funding both of those things, eliminating fees and fully funding textbooks. I think it's not an either or situation. Personally, I'd prefer, if we had time, and I think we're under a huge time constraint here, I'd prefer to go category by category, department by department, and try to figure out how we can reduce some of these expenditures. That would be my preference. I don't think we have time to do that, but that's what I would like to do. I would like to see a classified salary freeze. I'm sorry, a classified hiring freeze. I think that we're hiring some new classified folks. I'm not sure that they're needed. Some may be, some may not be. Things like that could be tried, but, you know, I don't really see anybody coming forth with any other suggestions about reducing expenditures. So I hate to pit, you know, fee waivers versus textbooks. I think there are other ways to work this budget.
Thank you, Ms. Silkwood. Mr. Hale?
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with Ms. Silkwood. Like I said before, for 3 years, I know I've been harping on our percentage of salary and benefits to our overall budget. And when we look at 87% of our budget this year, salary and benefits, it's the only category. It's the only category where you can talk about millions of dollars. You just can't talk about it in maintenance. You can't talk about it in utilities because there's just not those kind of funds there. 87% of $200 million, it doesn't leave much remaining for textbooks and school buses. That's the big piece of the pie that has to be addressed. And again, not to lay that on Dr. Phillips or this board. This board's been well aware of that for 3 years because I brought it to the attention every budget cycle. It's unsustainable. If we go from 87% to 80%, that's $14 million, and there's funds in the budget for these things. However, we've made commitments to our current employees that have been made for 30 years. And I'm not proposing that we go into our current employee base and say, we've promised you this for all these years. You've been with us for 20 years now. We're going to take it away from you. But it's a road that we have to go down, and it's going to take some time to get there. I'm not happy about it. I mean, I think we should have started down that road 3 years ago, and we'd be closer to, maybe 84%. So we'd have another $1.5 million, $2 million on our way for a couple more $1 million soon. But, if we can cut 7% ultimately out of salaries and benefits, we're going to be pretty close to as lean of an organization as you can have in a setting like this. So I don't disagree with your comments. In fact, I agree with most of them. But we can go through line item, we can go through maintenance, but there's just not enough money there to say we can cut back on this heat and air condenser and not have heat this winter. It's salaries and benefits. That's the only major category that has enough funds there, and I'm not sure that it's anything where we can do wholesale cuts without affecting our current employee base. So I just added those comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. I'll come to you here in a minute, but let me say, just make a couple of comments here. Dr. Phillips has been on the job 7 weeks, 8 weeks. Hadn't been to all of our schools yet. I think he knows his way up and down the hallway here in the central office at this point. But, I know one of the things that he will look at is he's going to look at staff allocation. Is he going to do that between now and the September 30th deadline mandated by the state that we have to have a budget passed? No, that's not going to happen. He needs to get a school year under his belt to make that happen. As far as allocation fees, it may not be that it's a lack of revenue, or it may not be that we're having to ask parents to pay fees. It may be what we're requiring those fees to be spent on. Why are we having student allocation fees buying mulch, putting fences up around playgrounds? Why are we doing that? Buying auditorium seats. I mean, we shouldn't be doing that. And so, at some point, it probably isn't as much about student fees as it is, and I'm not opposed to that, but maybe instead of $550,000 into student allocation fees, $550,000 should be put into capital projects, and it be used for those sorts of things, and then get the student allocation fees actually being spent on what student allocation fees should be spent upon. So, there's some work to do. I have complete confidence in Dr. Phillips and his staff to identify those things. I suspect strongly that the next year budget process is going to be entirely different, but he has to have some time to get that plan developed. Mr. Hale, you're absolutely correct. The only place we really have to cut is in staff allocation. You cannot operate an organization on the amount of money we have for operational fees. It's just very, very, very difficult to do, and some of those things are beyond our control. We don't set what our utility rates are. We don't set what the price of diesel fuel is. We can't determine what the price of purchasing a school bus or textbook is. And if we need those tools to do our thing, we have to pay what the rate is. The only thing we do have control over is staff allocation. Ms. Silkwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify something that you said. Student fees that parents pay at registration and whatnot throughout the year, a lot of what fundraiser dollars go toward is actually funding copier machines, copy paper and related supplies, and computer equipment in the elementary schools. We also do fund mulch and things like that through fundraisers, and probably in some form or fashion through student fees as well. But I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear exactly what the majority of those fees go toward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Silkwood. Mr. Gregory?
I'd like to, before we make a decision on what Ms. Silkwood said, and I do understand what she says, but we got two different categories here about a hiring freeze, and that being, we have positions open which were filled this past year. I know we've lost some in the last 2 or 3 weeks simply because of pay scale, and that particular staff it's been understaffed for several years. And the reason, well, I'm talking about maintenance, we wouldn't have 970 work orders. I think I said 972 the other night, so maybe they caught up too. We wouldn't have 970 work orders if they were completely staffed. So I'm definitely not for saying that those two positions, and there may be other positions, throughout, in this building, the support building, that are not filled at this time because of people leaving. Would that be true or not true? I don't know. Are there other positions besides the two that I'm thinking of that are not?
Well, Mr. Gregory, let me speak to that. I think you're referring to 2 maintenance workers that have left. We've lost bookkeepers. We've had some custodians leave. I mean, we got a lot of positions where just at this time of year, there's a lot of turnover. Again, our job is to set policy and pass budgets. Dr. Phillips has the burden of trying to figure out how to allocate and bring us a school system that can operate within the funds we have allowed. And, I for one, am not comfortable trying to pick positions, to freeze positions, that sort of thing, without his having time to look at that and provide input, because I wouldn't want us to freeze something that's crucial for him to accomplish the goals we've got to accomplish. So I understand everybody's frustration. Right now, we have a budget in front of us that's $3.7 million out of budget, or out of balance. If there's anything else anyone would like added into that, now's the time to do so. Otherwise, we're going to need a motion to vote on the budget as it stands right now. Let me go to Mr. Daniels. He hasn't spoken yet, and then I'll come back to Mr. Hale.
Well, that's what I was going to ask and clarify. Right now, we're at 3.7 out of balance. And, as I've done research and looked at where our county stands versus other counties in the state of Tennessee, I know that our teacher salary, their average rank, we're 41st in Tennessee in average teacher salary. I know that when we look at population change increase over the last 8 years, we're number 8, 21% growth. I know when we look at expenditures per pupil in average daily attendance, we're 91st. And we're talking about textbooks, and we're talking about being out of balance, 3.7 million, and we're talking about a tax rate that doesn't meet our needs and a county commission that doesn't meet our needs, and we're talking about a county commission who's provided rumors that potentially, if we provide them a budget that's too out of balance, they're not going to fix a roof on a school that's being held on with cinder blocks, and they're not going to add two wings onto a school that's already, has too many students, is already over capacity. And so, you know, I find this to be a little bit scary, but my question, I guess, for Dr. Phillips is, what are you comfortable with in providing to our county commission? Is 3.7 out of balance a number that we're comfortable asking? I'm afraid if we try to get down to balance, all we're doing is basically providing a, you know, status quo budget. We're saying, you know we've got these needs, we're saying here, we're dedicated to preparing graduates, engaging minds, developing character. That's what's on our website. But yet, we want to be 91st in the state in student expenditures. And we don't want to build wings because you can't balance your budget. We're going to take money away and then ask you to still fund teacher increases that are mandated by the state. We're going to give our employees a 3% pay increase, you know, but, you know, if you increase yours and it adds another $1.5 million to the budget, well, you know, now we're not going to build a school or add wings or fix a roof. So my question, I guess, as I said, is what are you comfortable with sending? And I realize, as Chairman Long said, you know, over the next year, you'll have a really good opportunity to look at where we are and look at our expenditures. And next year, hopefully, we can make some of the decisions we need to make and make some of the cuts. But what are you comfortable with sending to our county commission?
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. I understand and basically agree with all of you that we're in a very difficult position in regard to the things that are on this list are needs that we feel like our students deserve and that we should present to our funding body. I agree with that. I also agree that there's probably opportunities within our system, once I've been here long enough to determine what those are, that will help alleviate possibly some of these things because they can be funded. So I'm going to have to work through that process, just as we've talked about several times before throughout this first year. I do believe that the organization, it's easy to understand that the organization continues to grow, yet funding for those basic needs has not continued to grow, and even, I think, has gone backward in regard to the pennies being taken away in the previous years. So that's something that is a source of contention, because when you try to be, and the dollar amount that you allocate doesn't necessarily correlate with being the best. I mean, you have to be efficient, and you have to drive the resources to the point where they have the largest impact, which is the classroom. So understanding all of those things, but it is difficult to have the #1 premier school district when you can't get basic needs funded. And as Mr. Long mentioned, you know, one of the things, I think the best asset our county has going for us is school district. I hope you feel like that too. And over time, you can neglect that, and it will sustain itself based on reputation and good people and other things, but you'll look back 10 years later and it will have an impact. And whether that's on home prices, growth, all of those things that impact the sustainability economically of our community, I don't think we want to be in that situation. I don't think anyone that lives in Sumner County wants to be in that situation. So your point's well taken.
Mr. Helm?
Following up on that, and I'm not sure, Dr. Phillips, that I heard you exactly, and Chairman Long, you may address this as well. We're talking about if we take draft budget number 4, put in the page 1 items, we're going to be about $3.7 million out of budget. If we take a needs-based budget, draft number 5, to them, we're going to be how many million out?
12.
Mr. 12 million. The question is, are we any more likely to get draft budget number 4 that's $3 million out approved when they've already set the tax rate, or is it going to come back to us, than we are the $12 million? If they've set the tax rate, does it matter if it's $3 million or $12 million? Because it doesn't look like it's, if they've already set the tax rate, neither one are going to be approved. So we're really talking about number 4 with nothing added in. So I guess this is more of a political question. Does it matter if we send them a $3.4 million out of budget number or a $12 million out of budget number if they're not gonna approve either one?
I'm hoping that was rhetorical in nature.
No, it wasn't. I mean.
Well, let me.
This is a political issue,
Yeah,
and
it
we're gonna
is,
send a
and-
budget over there.
And let me,
And if they've already set the tax rate,
they have, and let me
if we're,
speak, let me
if we're
speak to that.
10,000 out of budget, or if we're 3 million or 12 million.
And let me speak to that. You know, if you're 6 foot tall and you jump in water 7 foot deep, or you jump in water 70 foot deep, it's the same thing. You're still over your head. I dare say that there's not a single commissioner that had children who wouldn't have done everything in the world they could to provide for the needs of their children. I'm not talking about wants, I'm talking about needs. Their children need to be fed, they need to be housed, they need to be clothed, and they did everything they could to provide for those needs. They have a responsibility as a commission and a funding partner to provide for needs for the school children in this county. And we have needs that aren't being met. As a parent, would you like to stand up in front of your friends and your neighbors and your constituents as an elected official and say, yeah, my child needs to eat tonight, but I'm not going to feed them. I just choose not to. I've got the ability to pay for it. I just don't want to pay for it because this county has the ability to pay for it. They just don't want to, or at least there are 24 individuals that don't want to. I don't know, Mr. Hale. I mean, it's $3.7 million out of balance. It's $12 million out of balance. I can't predict what they're going to do anymore. I know we have identified some things that we absolutely have to have. Absolutely. We can't survive without those. And we're $3.7 million in excess of the revenue. Why? Because 2 years ago, they took a penny of the tax rate away from us. 2 years ago, or last year, they took 2 cents of the tax rate away from us. This year, they're talking about taking 2.3 cents of the tax rate away from us. I don't know where it ends. Maybe we just close our doors and go to the house. I don't know. Right now, we have on the table a budget that's $3.7 million out of balance. I'm going to go over there and present it along with Dr. Phillips. Where it stands, I can't express the frustration. Every year we sit up here and have to face this. Every single year. I don't know what direction to give you at this point.
Well, when I look at the list of items, if I still have the floor, you know, and we talk about a needs-based budget, well, I saw a nurse on there. I think that's a need. You know, are we going to be back here? I guess we'll know that soon enough, maybe as early as Tuesday. But, you know, talking about what Mr. Duncan said and sending a needs-based budget, then sending an absolute, I mean, you get to the point where if you send the 3.7 million over and it's not approved, you know, where do you go from there? So do you send the 12, the 3.7, or the 3.7 with a list that said, here are the things that are also absolutely essential, you know, I guess part of what I need to decide here for my vote is it really going to make any difference if it's 3.7 or 6.7?
Mr. Burr? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For 3 years, I've sat here and I've listened to Mr. Duncan's wisdom of saying send over a needs-based budget, and we've said, well, you know, that is wisdom, and we do need to tell them what we need, but it's also our job to send them over a balanced budget, and for 3 years in a row, we've done that. We've sent the balanced budget. We've eliminated the needs that we knew that we needed that at some point in time was going to come back and bite us. They're here. They have come back to bite us. You know, not only have we sent a balanced budget over, but we sent a balanced budget with reduced revenue, where they took the pennies away. We still balanced it. I think it may be time to send the needs-based budget over here, because I'm just sitting here, you know, I can't understand how, you know, I talked to a lady yesterday that is a single mom, and she has a little daughter that she's trying to go to school and get a better education so that she can take care of this kid, and we got to go ask her for $65 for that kid. When the federal government says we're going to provide you free education, that don't seem right. And another thing that don't seem right to me is we're looking at 12-year-old books that we're giving these kids to learn with, and we want to better our kids. How do you better them and not give them what they need? And we've balanced and balanced and balanced, and they've taken away and taken away and taken away. And I'm going to address the 900-pound gorilla in the room. We're sitting here worrying about it. You know, these things have caught up with us, and it's time to present this budget and say, we've got to have these things. These are things that we've got to have. We put them off, we put them off, we put them off, and now it's time that we've got to have them. But we can't do that because you've got this 81 Act dangling over us, that if we don't send you a balanced budget, you're going to take away our buildings. You're going to take away these things. So that's the 900-pound gorilla that's in the room right now. And, you know, I think we're just going to have to overlook it and send it to them. And I think the people of Sumner County have got sense enough to know that there's people sitting on this board that are for the kids, that are for classroom allocation, that are for putting money in there. But I think the people in Sumner County also have sense enough to know that when you take 3 cents away, and we put off needs and put off needs, I think that they figure out that at some point in time, you know, you got to have that stuff. You can't. Do we go into school next year with 13-year-old books? Do we go into the next year with 14-year-old books? How long do we keep putting these things off? Because they say, if you don't send us a balanced budget, we're gonna take this away, we're gonna take that away. I'm just about to the point to say, and I agree with Mr. Hale, what difference does it make? 12 million out of budget or 3 million out of budget? They've already set the tax rate. They didn't ask us. They didn't wait for a budget to get over there to see, hey, this is what we need. You know, the school board's really trying here. They didn't look at that. They just set the tax rate and said, that's all the money we're going to give you. So they've pretty well got it made up in their mind. I think it's time that Sumner County calls their commissioners and says, you know, it's time to take care of our kids. I also understand that efficiency is very important. That's why I voted for Dale Phillips to be our new director. I think he's the man that can take care of this, but nobody can come in 7 weeks' time and take care of this. I think next year, like's already been said, we're going to see a big difference in the budget because I think that he'll find efficiencies in here that we can take care of. Certainly agree with that totally. But as for where we're at right now and the mandatory deals that we're up against now, I don't see how I can sit here and vote for something to make this lady that I talked to yesterday still spend the $65 and take her books away. You know, tell her kid, we're going to charge you $65. You're a single mom. We're going to charge you $65. And by the way, your child's going to be learning on a 12-year-old book. I don't see how I can sit here and do that. I think it's time that we send the needs-based over there to them. And Mr. Duncan said many, many times, and I've listened to that wisdom, send it over there and let them write off what they don't want to fund. I think it might be time to do that.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Motion.
Motion for, is this to go back to budget number 5 that we worked through, or to send this budget 4 that we've added to?
The one that is 3.7 million now.
So your motion is to approve the budget that we have developed so far this morning,
Yes.
which is approximately $3.7 million out of balance. This would be budget draft number 4 with the additions of the items we identified this morning. Mr. Brown?
Before I vote on this, I'd like to say this. I like your story about jumping in 7-foot water and being 6 foot tall, or being 5.5. I've been doing it all my life. But I came out down the creek, down the river, survived, well and good. I'd go to my father and say, Dad, I need $20. He said, boy, you crazy? Give me 10, you know. I don't know whether we need to use this scenario on the Sumner County court or not, but it's time we send over what we need and expect the need to be filled. Now, we need to talk to our commissioners about that, because they're doing everything else in the world, but we need this, we need our needs filled. I'm tired of the kids knocking on my door and wanting to sell them phyllo dough And my grandkids, we have to buy the stuff 3 times to get their class pleased with the total money they gotta have for a little something, I don't know what. But what I'm saying in this, and I'd like to second Tim's motion there, that we go ahead and send it back over there and with the budget as things we need. And we fly it all the way to the ground. If we don't like that, we'll come back and do another, we might fine tune it a little bit, but hey, they've taken the monetary system away from us. Are they all that genius over there that they can, let them manage the thing and pay the bills and send it back to us? And let me just come once a month on Tuesday night and sit here and take a nap. You know, we've got to have the thing funded, sir.
Mr. Brown, points well made. Mr. Gregory?
I think Mr. Hale may have asked this question a few minutes ago, but how much job ed money do we have that is not committed?
If you're looking at draft 4, it is committed. And that we, at least I think I need a clarification, if it's committed all for regular teaching positions or teaching positions and coordinators, but it's committed. If you're looking at draft 5, there's about $700,000 available. But bear in mind that, in my opinion, some of that or all of it is going to be needed to fund the shortfall that we're going to face eventually when we get down to the bitter end of trying to get this budget together.
The next comment, I know on the other side of town, they've used the issue they had to give their employees salary increases. And the reason they gave was that the fact that they were losing employees. We are too. We have. And let's take that a step further. We're having difficult finding employees too. I know a lot of times people think, well, we ain't going to go to work do something for the school system. And I've even heard that comment, do something. These people are specialized employees. And I'm not for tying our hands the fact that we cannot hire people who we need to operate an efficient school system.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Ms. Daniels, do you have something else?
I did. Just to clarify the motion, are we proposing the 3.7?
Yes, this is budget draft number 4 with the addition of everything on page 2 and half of the item number 6 on page 3 in the notes that were provided to us.
Which doesn't include the pay increase for our employees to match what counties?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Any further comment on the motion?
I'm sorry, the comment was that what we're proposing does not include the pay increase to match what?
It doesn't include the 3%. It does include the mandatory step increases required by state law.
But that's all.
I can assure you I'll be mentioning it.
But if I could clarify that too, the teachers will get the mandatory step, and the state, the classified, there is no increase for any of those.
I would think we could certainly include notes on what we are having to exclude from our budget. I would think that we could, I don't know for sure if we want to make it in a minute, we could certainly include notes to what we're having to exclude, which would be a matching increase for our employees as well as other textbooks and things that are absolutely, we feel, kind of needed. I would think that maybe we could add an amendment of things that we're having to exclude out of the budget so they could see that we are having to exclude raises, textbooks, maintenance positions, nursing positions, things like that. I'm sure that they could, Dr. Phillips could talk about also things that we're having to exclude, which we feel are very necessary for our school right now.
All right, Mr. Brewer just told me he is willing to amend his motion to include the items that were a list of items when we present this budget that says these are the things we're not doing. You've given your employees a pay raise. We're not going to be able to do that. Is that all right with you, Mr. Brown, as a second?
Yes.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion? Mr. Hale?
I have one question. Ms. Dursky, am I correct in stating that the county funds approximately $2,500 per student of our total budget?
Yes, the local taxes are about $2,500, that's correct.
And in the last 3 years, they've taken away 3 pennies. We've increased our student population by 1,500 approximately. If I take 1,500 students by $2,500, that's $3.4 million. So the discussion we're having is directly related to the lack of fund or the cut of funding over the last 3 years.
Exactly right.
But on the other hand, as those pennies were taken away, County General's getting ready to turn around and give all their employees a 3% increase
Using our money.
using our money,
That's correct.
and we're going to send over a budget that doesn't include that. You know, I guess if you're,
Mr. Brewer's about
I mean,
to make an
I'll
amendment.
tell you,
to his
it's a little bit
motion.
upsetting.
I was fixing to.
And I want to get something that we can pass as a group and that the county commission can support. But quite honestly, I don't think they're going to support the $3.4 million increase, let alone anything else. So, you know, I've got a real concern about that. You know, we're not in a good situation. We know it's going to take us some time to work out of this. Just bring that up for the point of discussion.
All right, Mr. Brewer is now amending his motion to include across-the-board 3% increase for all employees.
I
Brown,
second that.
Is that all right with your second?
I
All right, so
second.
that's back in our main motion. So everybody understand where we are today?
Let me ask you a question. Mr. Chairman,
Recap.
is that motion, would that be inclusive of the 1.6 so that all employees would be at 3%?
Yes, let me explain where we are.
Not some at 3 and some at 4.6?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, let me explain where we are. The motion we have on the table is for draft budget number 4. We will include or add to draft budget number 4 all items on page 2 of the notes. We will include item 6 on page 3, which is approximately $550,000 of student allocation fees for this year. And we will include the monies to give all employees a 3% pay increase. For those teachers that are receiving on average a 1.6% increase, we will make up the difference between whatever increase they receive that they're being provided and 3%. So if some of them got a 2, we would add 1 to them. If they got a 1, we'll add 2 to them, that sort of thing. Ms. Dursky?
I just want to clarify so that there's no confusion if this comes out. Some of the if you do that, if you put in to get enough money to give a minimum 3% raise to all employees, simply by virtue of the 1.6 state raise and the step, some teachers will get slightly over 3% anyway. If you do nothing about making sure everybody gets a minimum 3%, in some cases, the step and the state raise are more than 3%.
But for those employees, are you telling me that by doing it as a step rather than an addition to step, it's going to send it over 3? Can we make that an addition to step and cap it at 3?
No, not the way the state pay scale works.
All right, and I know that's a small number of people.
It's a number of the steps between 3 and 19. Certified.
Certified.
This is only certified, but the step raise that they're entitled to, plus 1.6 on the state raise, you know, for example, at a master's in 13 is 3.4%, master's in 14 is 3.2. And that can't be helped. That's just virtue of the state mandated scale. I just want you to know that some employees will get more than 3, so if that comes out, that's not by action of this board, it's by action of the state.
Thank you for that clarification. All right, does everybody understand where we are? We have a motion. We have a second, Mr. Daniels.
Just to clarify, so when we're adding back in, are we essentially adding in numbers 1, 2, and 3 on page 3?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
We're adding items 1, 2, and 3 and half of item 6. Any further discussion?
I
Mr. Duncan?
I would just like to say, I appreciate us sending this over there. I've been here 24 years, run on 24 years, preaching to this and this and this and this, and we every year fail to do this, and we see where we are right now. But we are very capable of handling our own funds over here. I think so. And I think we got a department that is well capable of handling these funds over here. So I think it's time for us to stand up and do what we need to do for the children of this county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan.
State of Tennessee thinks we do pretty well.
They stole one from us, didn't they, Mr. Gregory? Mr. Hale?
I know
I just couldn't resist.
we're moving
It
forward.
made me
with this.
feel better.
So far, we've talked about this, and Mr. Daniels brought this up, and when I looked at it on page 3, make sure I'm reading it, this is on the notes page, Ms. Dursky. Discretionary expenditures not included in the number 4 draft, item number 4. And we just talked about,
Okay, though, with the approval of draft 4, the recommendation then is to fund those positions through Ed Jobs money.
right, so I just want to make sure that that's part of this. Okay. What?
Through general purpose with Ed
Okay.
Jobs.
And 5 would be through federal projects?
Yes,
Okay.
Title II. And understand Ed Jobs is a one-year fix.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Will show the general purpose budget has been approved. We now have to move on to, I guess we have our federal projects draft budget, our endowment fund draft budget, and school nutrition. Ladies and gentlemen, I hate to have to do this, but I'm going to have to turn this meeting over to the vice chairman.
I was getting ready to make a motion to approve all 3, Mr. Chairman.
Well,
It's fine.
all right, I tell you what, let's do it like this.
Endowment's easy.
The endowment budget, there's really not a whole lot we can do.
Motion to approve.
Motion to
Second.
approve, and second by Ms. Cox. All in favor signify by saying aye. All right, we've approved the endowment budget. Let's look at the federal projects budget.
Motion approved.
Motion by Mr.
Oh.
Gregory, a second by Mr.
I-
Duncan.
Wait a minute. Maybe I shouldn't have looked at Ms. Dursky.
Well, I'll ask for clarification. Do you want to include, by motion of this board, 1, 2, or 3 of the prevention coordinators that were requested by Pat Connor?
Yes,
I
I'd like
just
to-
needed a motion on that.
Motion to approve prevention coordinators' positions.
Motion by Ms. Cox, a second by Mr. Duncan.
And that would be with job ed money? The prevention
Yes,
coordinator?
that would be with Ed Jobs money for 1 year, and the
Right.
balance of that money then, with the
Goes to
approval of the
teachers.
general purchase, is for regular ed classroom teachers.
All right, I have a motion, a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, so the federal projects budget, the only thing we have left is the school nutrition draft budget. The only comment I'd like to make is I know we have some money left over from last year because expenditures didn't meet what the projected expenditures were, and I believe there's about, is that about $800,000? Is that correct? Ms. Dursky, do you know?
We're waiting for the exact figure on that from the state when Ms. Becker files her final report with the state nutrition department. But I believe there'll be some amount of excess fund balance, yes.
And the only thing that I was going to comment on that is traditionally, if we've purchased cafeteria tables or things like that, that's been split 1/3 with the nutrition department, 1/3 comes out of the school's money, and 1/3 comes out of our general purpose. I think with that much in excess funds, those purchases can be absorbed in their entirety by the nutrition department, those excess funds. So if we do have a motion to approve that, this budget, I would like that attached to it. I also would like to pass this out. This is just an update, just so we'll know where our lunch prices, how they compare to others. So I'm going to make that comment. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Hale as Vice Chairman. If you guys finish up, you're welcome to join me at the Sumner County Republican Breakfast, or whatever they call it. Sumner County Republican Breakfast, and I'll be down there hopefully pleading a case for some involvement in the 1981 Financial Management Act. Hale?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of points on this. I believe, may have a couple of discussion items. I think Ms. Becker may have something to say on this. Lunch prices staying the same. Lunch prices are holding steady. I saw you may have a comment on what Mr. Long said about the furniture. Without objection, you can address that this time. Dr. Phillips.
If anything that is purchased with federal funds in school nutrition is utilized by more than school nutrition, then it must be an allocated expenditure.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. Any other questions or comments on this school nutrition budget? Ms. Cox?
Can you please clarify, in other words, from what you just said, in other words, like we talked about purchasing the cafeteria tables, can you please clarify?
For example, in the commons area where the cafeteria tables would go, if that commons area is utilized by other things in the school besides school nutrition, by serving the students, then it must be an allocated expenditure. And most of our common areas are used for many multi-purpose activities.
So you're saying you don't want to use that for cafeteria tables? What would you use that expenditure for then?
What I would utilize the expenditure for would be with all of our older schools, we are in dire need of equipment purchases to replace the old equipment in the kitchens. And anytime there might be an excess balance, that is a big plus. I've got right now 6 ovens that need to be replaced. I've got one oven at J.W. Wiseman that the gas is a small leak, and I've got to replace that, So that's the way that it is utilized.
So I guess who's approving the tables then? I'm confused. Who approved
What
the
has
tables?
happened in the past, it has been an allocated expenditure. Anytime there is a need for cafeteria tables, usually the principal will notify me after they have met with the director of schools for their budget for the coming year. And the allocation has been, we pay 1/3 of that expenditure. School nutrition pays 1/3. The school pays 1/3, and operations, out of the operations budget, they have been paying 1/3 of the expenditure.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's, Ms. Becker might clarify, I don't know that the percentages are specified. I think it has to be, some rational thought put into what's the allocated use of those. So I just want to make that point.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. I guess y'all can take a look at that.
No, not all the money. I don't have to allocate all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. Ms. Silkwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. $800,000 sounds like a lot of extra money. And I don't know much about kitchen ovens and whatnot, but I do know that I met with Ms. Poe before she left Ellis Middle. And something she told me that struck me as very odd is that they still have these same cafeteria tables in that school, when the same ones that were there when the building opened. And they're very old and decrepit, becoming dangerous. I would hope that in the $800,000 excess, we could find money to purchase cafeteria tables and the Wiseman oven that's needed with this money.
Of course, freezers, the last freezer that was purchased was $54,000. I mean, equipment is expensive, and it's going up every year. So I don't know till the report is filed and the state issues back exactly what that amount will be, But you're right. In some schools, we've helped to replace tables maybe 1 or 2 times. In some schools, we've helped 3 and 4. And I guess some people take their tables, the same basic table has been purchased. Now, Operation procures the purchase of the tables, but some are lasting longer than others, and it may be, different things that might enter into why some are lasting longer than others.
Ms. Silkwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to be clear about what Ms. Poe, when we had our meeting and what she told me. Essentially having the PTO has to fund a portion of those tables, or that's, I guess, what would normally be done. Then the school would have to fund a portion, and she told me the PTO has been concentrating on fully funding their copier machine in the school and fully funding their computer lab, which is now outdated, and they need to fund that as well. So it would be great to have, if you have almost $1 million sitting in a fund that could be used, and, we could purchase cafeteria tables with that, that would be huge.
I understand that. But I mean, we have a law that we have to comply with too because of the federal funds. We have federal laws, state laws, and our local policies. And I mean, if it's a shared allocation, I understand.
Maybe Ms. Dursky can answer this question. What exactly is the shared allocation percentage? Is it a third, a third, a third, or is there some other percentage? You're kind of, you look.
Well, I don't know exactly what the percentage is. And it is true, if you're using federal funds and they're not all used for the specific purpose, then it does have to be allocated. That's true in Title I, special ed, any kind of federal dollars. Not all of the revenue, obviously, in school nutrition is federal. There is probably 50% of it is just charges collected from students who pay, or adults. So, and I don't know if the school, if it's, Ms. Becker would have to speak to whether or not the regulations require the individual school to pay part of it, or if that's just something that has been happening here.
That was a decision that was told to me. I didn't make that decision. But I do know that when other allocated expenditures are charged, when the state comes in, they review it and review the expenditure and ensure that we're not paying any more than our allocated percentage should be paid.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. Ms. Silkwood. I see here where you're planning on spending approximately $200,000 this year on new equipment.
That also includes replacement equipment too. And that's what I put in the budget because we always have emergencies. And you never know when an emergency might occur. We may have a freezer go out and our maintenance technicians have repaired, and especially in some of the older schools, they're really good about trying to maintain them, but sometimes they're no longer maintainable and they have to be replaced.
And Ms. Becker, I know we talked about this a couple of years ago and you've been working on that, but one thing I want to make sure is when you come through, I think a couple of years ago we had to approve about a $3 million single source bid for food purchase. I think that was 2 years ago. I know you'll use all reasonable efforts to get as many bids as you can on
Right.
sourcing that. And sometimes we may have to loosen our specifications a little bit to make sure that we're getting best pricing on that. But I know Mr. Brown addressed that at the time. So is anything else on this budget that we need to address?
I would just like to comment. Listening and taking the advice of you, Mr. Hale, and others, I have worked diligently this last year in utilizing the labor the best I can. The managers have worked very, very hard on managing their budgets in their schools and cutting down on waste. Now, whatever the end result, you see that we have not raised lunch prices in, 3 years? So I'm saying they have done a remarkable job in cutting down and utilizing the labor the best they possibly can. And the end result shows.
Yeah, and Ms. Becker, I commend you on that. Any department that can freeze their revenue and their prices, end with surplus, and fund themselves and have money for replacement equipment, you're not looking to the board for those funds. I commend you to that. And of course, we're always, including your department, looking to, no matter how efficient we are, we always have to continue to look at that. But I do commend you for that. That's, you've done a remarkable job on that, really.
Thank you. And one other comment. Just remember, when you're looking at the expenditure line item for this year, and you're looking at the salary line item for this year, we had 12 days that we did not purchase food because of snow. We had 12 days that we did not pay employees because of snow. So if we have good weather this next year, then those line items could possibly have to be amended, because on the renewal bid, pricing went up 3.8 to 5%. And I just wanted to remind you all now, in case that did happen.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. Dr. Phillips?
Ms. Hale, I would like to say too, as I look through some of the departmental budgets, one thing that I know Ms. Dursky and also Ms. Becker and I talked about, she does have included in her budget for her P&L statement every year the direct cost of her salary and benefits. And that's when you look at other systems, there's all types of variants. Sometimes they say, well, we're self-sufficient, but when you really look, they're paying salary but not benefits. The district's carrying that out of GP. So I just want to commend Ms. Becker that when she says they're charging those direct expenses out of their budget, and they've been able to do that and still hopefully have an opportunity this year to purchase some equipment or some cafeteria tables or some of those things, that's a good thing. And so I just want to make sure I commend her about that.
Thank you. Ms. Silkwood?
Thank you. Ms. Becker, if I could ask, would you support purchasing giving whatever percentage it would be to fund the cafeteria tables at Ellis?
The allocated expenditure, yes. If it's an allocated expenditure, I can't pay for all those tables by in-school nutrition. It has to be an allocated expenditure, but yes, if it is, I would.
For your portion, you would support that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then let me remind you too that the State Department of Agriculture bids out the delivery for commodity distribution. This year, every case that's delivered to Sumner County has gone up 17 cents per case. Just as a reminder to you on that too. That's a huge increase, but that's the way it is, and that's what we have to pay. And we are delivering thousands and thousands of cases of commodities.
Well, and we see
$550,000 worth.
And we're seeing that, I think we're starting this year at budgeting 80 cents a gallon higher for fuel, so I understand where those increases come from. Mr. Gregory, you had your light on. Do you have something? Okay. Does anybody else have anything for Ms. Becker? Before we vote on this, Ms. Becker, how many meals will you serve this year?
Probably 17,700 per day.
17,700 per day?
That's my estimate.
Okay. Times 180 days?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we move on?
One question, Dr. Phillips. What's the numbers for total in the county? Has it reached 28,000?
Ms. Brown has taken the numbers. I know the principals have sent that to her. Of course, I don't think we'll get a true reflection until probably we're looking at meeting as a team Wednesday, late after school, because it'll take us a couple of days of a full day of school to find out.
In probably 2 weeks, really.
Yeah, everywhere I've been, I've kind of given a 2-week window, 2 full weeks of school. So that's what we're looking at before we would make any adjustments. We've told the principals that, but Ms. Brown can comment. I'm not sure at this point that we really know.
Until we have full load and everyone's on board, we really can't, till we find out who's actually gonna show up and not show up.
But Mr. Gregory, what I intend to do is probably Wednesday, after we meet as a team and we kind of have the initial numbers, we'll have Jeremy communicate with everyone by email, so you just kind of know where we're at as a district, if that's okay.
Just the word, what I'm hearing from all parts of the county, really, I believe our numbers are going to exceed what we thought.
Well, it very well could. I know we thought that in a couple of places, but then they've kind of backed off of that to normal growth. But as I've mentioned, until we get everybody here and you know how it is, Mr. Gregory, it's the same way when I was principal. I mean, until you get a few days out full steam, you know, you really can't make any real prediction. But if it's okay with the board, after we meet as a team Wednesday, we'll have 3 days of numbers. I'll send that to the board just so you kind of know.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. And Ms. Becker, if my calculations are correct, that's 3,186,000 meals this school year. It's a lot of food. It's a lot of biscuits. All right, I have a motion and a second on this. Is that right, Mr. Johnson, since I took over in the middle of this? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Ms. Becker? He suggested and we ignored it. So, well, you've explained to it that you have to pay an allocation under federal law, so it wouldn't make any difference what we pass up here anyway. Thank you. I guess that wraps it up and we're adjourned. We appreciate you being here.